Here I have a social networking style application where a user can log in and sign up onto the site, and then they can interact with other users on that application. So as you can see, here's a user list, and what I want to be able to do in this episode is add other users as friends. As you can see, here's an add a friend link on this user list, but currently it does nothing because this is what I want to implement here in this episode. What's interesting about this problem is that it requires a self-referencing association because one user needs to be associated with other users, and we're not dealing with two separate models in an association like we normally are. It's all self-referencing. So how do we accomplish that? And I want to show you in this episode. So here's that view file for our user list page where we just loop through all of our users, and here's that add friend link. As you can see, it currently does nothing. We want to add some behavior into here, so our add friend link does add a friend association. But before I get into the association details inside of Active Record, I want to talk a little bit about controllers and actions and where code belongs, because this is going to have to trigger some controller action in order to add a friend to a user. Now we already have a user's controller, which lists the users, has a user show page for the profile page. We can sign up new users and so on, and this seems like a somewhat logical place to handle friends as well, because we're dealing with users here. So what you might end up doing is creating an add friend action along with a remove friend action and so on to add and remove friends from a user. But this is not the right way to go at all, and that's because you need to, well, for several reasons. For one thing, it's not within the 7 REST style actions, so that should raise some alarms for you. It's not the standard index, show, create, update, destroy actions and so on. So these are a little bit out of place. Another reason they don't belong is that notice the word friend is in both places. This is a sign that we're namespacing these action names basically, and so they really should belong in their own controller. Another thing to watch out for is the keywords add and remove in your action names. This is another sign that you're trying to create and destroy a single resource, but you're translating that as adding and removing something from another resource. So that is a few things to watch out for as you're adding controller actions to determine if they really belong in that one controller. In this case, they don't belong here at all. Usually the solution is to create another controller for handling that. In this case, we want to create a friendships controller with a create and destroy action to handle creating and destroying friendships. Now the naming of this is important because you could name it a friends controller, but that really isn't proper because you aren't really creating and destroying friends. You're creating and destroying the friendship, which is a join of a user to a friend. And that's an important distinction as you're dealing with resources. Now let's think a little bit about how we're going to handle this association in Active Record. Now what we want is a many-to-many style association because a given user can have many different friends, and a given user can also be a friend to many other users. And the way we can do this in Rails is actually 2 different techniques, and I go into them in more detail in episode 47 if you want to check that out. You can either use a has and belongs to many method, which really is not used much nowadays. The best way to go is has many through here, and really you almost always want to choose this option. And the way you do that is create a join model, and in this case I'm going to call it friendship, and it's going to be basically the same name as our new controller we need to create as well. So this is a nice resource that we're going to create to handle the join of this association. Now we know we need to create a new model and controller, so I'm going to use my nifty scaffold generator, and let's create a new model called friendship. And then this will have several columns. One is going to be a user ID, which is kind of the owner of the friendship or the initiator. And then we'll also have a friend ID, and this will actually refer to a user model. It will just be the other side of the relationship, basically who the user is friending. And then we also want to specify which actions we want in our controller, so I'm just going to have a create and destroy action inside of our friendships controller. And don't forget to migrate your database. So now we have this friendships controller, which can handle the adding and removing a friend using the create and destroy actions. So now it's treated as its own singular resource, and we aren't cluttering up another controller with different actions. Now there's a few things we need to do here to improve it, but let's not get into that quite yet. Let's set up the association first. Let's start in our friendship model, and in here we need to set up our belongs to association. So we say belongs to user, which is going to be the initiator or owner of this friendship, and then also belongs to a friend, which is another user. So because it can't determine it by the name friend, we need to specify our class name in here and say we want to use user as the model for this association. And here's what our user model looks like. It has some code in here to handle the authentication, but just ignore it for the most part. We want to focus on adding an association here. And the way we do that is through, just like you would any other many-to-many association, just say has many friendships, and then has many friends through friendships. That's actually all you need to do here. You don't need to specify custom naming because everything else can be determined by Rails through the association, because friends knows to go through the friend model, and it knows to use the user as the owner of friendships as it goes through the association. So now that our association is set up, it's time to get this add friend link working. So let's go back to our view and focus on that. So here's the view file again for that user list, and this is where we need to implement our add friend link. So we want to direct this to our friendships controller create action. And the way we do that is call friendships path and then method as post. So that will trigger a post request, which will go to the create action in our friendships controller. But we aren't done yet because we also need to specify which user we're trying to add as a friend. And we can do that by just passing in additional parameters in here. So we can say friend ID as the user, and that will pass in the user's ID along with theirs so we can grab it in our friendships create action. And here's our create action, which we want to fix so that it properly creates a new user's friendship. So the way we can do this is call current user.friendships.build. And so that way we take our current user model and build a friendship through it so that it automatically sets up the user association on friendship. So we don't have to set that up here. And we can call friend ID and pass in our friend ID parameter from our URL, which is passed in from our previous request. And then we save it. We can say added friend, and then go back to our root. If it doesn't save successfully, some validation error, we don't have a new action to render. So let's just say display our flash unable to add friend, and then redirect back there. Of course, you'd want to make this error message a little bit more descriptive. Our destroy action still needs work too, but we'll get to that in a bit. So now when we go to that page, we can add users as friends. And then what I want to be able to do is go to our profile and then see a list of the users that we've added as friends here. And so here's that profile view. So what we want to do is add a friends list here. So we can say do a loop over the user's friends, which will access that association. So it's returning a list of users which match it, and we'll just display the username here as well inside of the list. And there we go. And now when we reload our page, there's our friends list, and it would be nice if we had a little remove link next to each one as well. So let me implement that. And so let me clean this up a little bit real quick. And in here we want a link called remove. And this should go to destroy that friendship. Now here's where things get a little bit complicated because, wait, how do we access our friendship's ID so we know which friendship we're trying to destroy? Remember, it's its own resource. Here we're just looping through the users that are the other friends' users. So this is a very common problem that a lot of beginners run into when handling many-to-many style associations. And what they forget about is we do have a join model, which is a model all on its own, and you can interact with that directly instead of jumping the gun and jumping straight to the user's friends. So we need to change this loop style a little bit. Instead of just looping through user friends, we need to loop through user friendships. And then we're accessing the friendship model directly here and calling friendship.friend, the username, to display the username of the friend. And then to remove it, here we can just directly go to our friendship model and just use our delete method so that it will destroy the friendship. Now we also need to fix our destroy action a little bit. Right now it's a big security hole because we can destroy any friendship, not just our own. And the way you get around that is you call current user.friendships.find, so it's impossible to access other users' friendships. And then we destroy that one, and then we've removed friendship, and then we'll just go back to our current user page, which is going to be our profile page. And when we reload the page here, now we have a remove link, and then we can click on one, and then it'll say removed friendship, and notice it's gone from the list. Because keep in mind, we're looping through our friendship models directly here and not accessing just the user model directly. So that way we do have access to our friendship ID so that we can reference it to remove it from the list. Now, one very important concept to grasp when you're dealing with self-referential associations like this is that we're only setting one side of the relationship when we're creating a friendship. So here, if we checked out Fred's profile, for example, we wouldn't see Ryan B listed under friends of Fred because he hasn't created a friendship for linking that association. So we're only dealing with one side of the association when we create a friendship, and if we want to make it mutual where both sides have the friend, then we would have to create a separate friendship record, basically two friendship records to establish that association. But let me show you how we could list, for example, people who have added me as their friend in this profile page so that we can see the other side of the relationship. And to accomplish this, we need to dive deep into the user model and add a couple more relationships or associations into here so that we can determine what other users have added this user as a friend. And to do that, we need to basically duplicate these, and it's a little bit difficult to come up with good names for this other side of the relationship, so I like to stay consistent and just call it inverse with a prefix, inverse friendships and inverse friends through inverse friendships. And that will give us the other side of the association once we specify some additional options into here. Now, because it can't be inferred already, we need to specify our class name as friendship for this join model. And we also need to specify our foreign key as friend ID. So we'll be using that as this current user's foreign key, and that association will be friend ID this time. And that means our source for our join has many through will be user, so that it will go through the friendship association and go out user association and friendship, so that it will fetch those user records which are the owner of the friendship basically, and not just the friend. Now back on the profile page, I want to display a list here of all the users who have friended us, so I'm just going to paste in the code here just to say friended by users, and then list the inverse friends here and display their username so that we can determine what other users have befriended this user. Now if we go to our profile page, we can see friended by users is empty because I haven't befriended any users. But if we log out and log in as Fred, then view the profile, we can see that I currently don't have any friends, but I have befriended by Ryan B. So that way we can see both sides of the relationship whenever we need to. This episode is sponsored in part by Pragmatic Screencasts. They offer high-quality screencasts on a variety of subjects, including Ruby and Rails. Check them out at pragmatic.tv. Also sponsored by RubyMine, a Rails IDE from JetBrains. It provides smart code completion, Rails refactorings, version control integration, and more. For a free 30-day trial, visit jetbrains.com/Ruby.